Hello, and welcome to Writer Wednesdays with Sara. I'm Sara R. Turnquist, multi-published clean historical romance author and someone who suffers with a mood disorder. I'm glad you're here. This week, we're looking at a well-known passage for anxiety, Philippians 4, 6 through 7. And the verse says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." In my journey with postpartum depression and a depressive mood disorder, I have had 2 stays in a behavioral health hospital. One several months after my second child's birth, and the other after my third child. The first stay in the hospital was truly one of the most difficult things in my life. I didn't know what to expect. I was weary, overwhelmed, wary of the things around me and the people around me, and in the midst of a deep darkness on my own. The first night, I was left with nothing, literally nothing but the clothes on my back and my tears. The next day, I started having some really intense anxiety, as you can imagine, partly because of the imbalance in my neurotransmitters and partly because of the reasons that I stated before. It was just an unknown place and an unknown experience to me. At any rate, I remember I approached my nurse and let her know that I was getting anxious because my psychiatrist had prescribed me something to take when I got anxious. So I expected that they would be able to give me anything that my doctors had prescribed to me. However, the nurse told me that she wasn't able to give me anything, not even those regular medications prescribed by my general psychiatrist, because the hospital psychiatrist I had been assigned to hadn't made his rounds yet. He would have to be the one to decide what medications I would and would not take while in the hospital. And as you can probably imagine, this did not help my anxiety. I did everything I could to calm myself. Things that my counselor had shown me, things that had helped in the past. However, I was in a full-blown panic attack before I was given any medicinal relief. I've had other moments like this too. These instances in the hospital were not the only times I struggled with anxiety and panic. Sometimes, and I'm thankful that this has not been frequent, my thoughts spiral and I end up near panic in the midst of anxiety. And I will use the medicinal tools if necessary, and I don't begrudge anyone who needs them more regularly. As I mentioned before, there are chemical components at play here that I do not wish to downplay or dismiss by any stretch of the imagination. But I also don't want to discount the spiritual side of the equation. In these moments of anxiety and near panic, I have found that if I can sit down and pray, or ask my husband to pray over me if I am too overwhelmed to think clearly, but he prays or I pray specifically for the peace of God to guard my heart and my mind. And doing this can ease the anxiousness, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot. As I or my husband pray these precious words that echo Philippians 4, I just imagine that God's peace washes over me, enfolds me, creates this cocoon around me that nothing can penetrate. In turn, I will pray this over friends and family members who are struggling with negative thoughts and anxiety. And I ask that God's peace will guard their hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. I believe that when we are dragged down by negative or intrusive thoughts, our minds become even more vulnerable to attack. The chemical side is very real, but what we do with the anxiety can sometimes make it worse. Merriam-Webster defines peace as freedom from disquieting or oppressive thoughts or emotions. When we're free from oppressive thoughts and emotions, we are able to be still. Then we can see things more clearly, see Him more clearly. I believe it also turns our hearts toward gratitude. And with our focus on God, not on our circumstances, we can experience true freedom, even in the midst of anxiety and depression. So as you combat Satan in your own flesh, try praying this for yourself or ask a loved one to pray this over you when you can't pray. God is ready and willing to answer. What about you? Do you believe God's peace can be a shield for your heart and your mind? Have you had a similar experience where God has eased your anxiety or depression? As always, thank you for listening and journeying with me. I hope to see you next week when I will talk more to the writing side of things with a short teaching on character development. Until then, blessings.